The smell of other people's emergencies clings to you. It gets into your scrubs, under your fingernails, right into your hair. After a 12-hour overnight in the South Philly emergency room, I smelled like a cocktail of antiseptic, stale coffee, and iron. All I wanted was a shower hot enough to scald my skin off and 6 hours of blackout sleep. My feet were throbbing as I climbed the 3 flights to our apartment, my sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. I was already calculating how long it would take to boil water for pasta when I saw it. The door, it was open, just a crack, maybe 6 inches, spilling the weak yellow light of our hallway onto the landing. My pulse, which had been at a resting crawl, kicked up into a sharp trot. I stopped, my hand still on the banister. We live in South Philly. An open door is not an invitation. It is a violation. Past tense? June, I called out, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet stairwell. No answer, just the distant sound of traffic and a neighbor's television muffled through the walls. I pushed the door open slowly with my foot, the way I would nudge a gurney, my body tensed, ready to see. I do not know what. Blood, usually. My mind always goes to blood. But there was no blood. The apartment was still, but wrong. The air was heavy, smelling of damp paper and something metallic, like old pennies. June was a chaotic slob, her art supplies and clothes usually exploding across every surface. But this was a different kind of mess. This was a ransacked quiet. A single sheet of pale pink paper was stark against the dark wood of our kitchen table. It was a pawn ticket. My stomach hollowed out. I did not need to read the fine print to know the signature at the bottom. It was for our mother's necklace, the last decent thing we owned. Next to it, almost eclipsing the pink slip, was a business card. It was the color of a starless night, thick cardstock that felt heavy, expensive. The lettering was simple, embossed in silver Adrian Vassallo. Underneath his name, 2 words, Executive Collections. No phone number, no address, just a name and a title that made my skin feel 2 sizes too small. When the wolf finally knocks on your door, you find out, very quickly, if you are the sheep or the shepherd. The knock did not sound like a knock. It was a heavy, definitive thud, like a judge's gavel hitting the wood. It came from the door frame of my own open door. I spun around. They had not been in the hallway a second ago. I would have heard them. But there they were, 3 of them, filling the entryway, blocking out the light. They wore dark suits, the kind that cost more than my last 3 months' rent, tailored so perfectly they looked less like clothes and more like armor. The 2 men flanking him were large, solid blocks of muscle and silent disapproval. They were the background. The man in the center was the focus. He had to be Adrian Vassallo. He was tall, with dark hair slicked back from a sharp widow's peak. He was not handsome in the way of movie stars. He was compelling in the way of a storm gathering offshore. His stillness was absolute. While his men scanned the room, his eyes, dark and assessing, landed on me. They did not move. It felt like an audit, not of my finances, but of my soul. He was checking for structural integrity. "Lena Hart," he said. It was not a question. His voice was low, a rumble without gravel, smooth and cold as marble. "Can I help you?" My voice came out steady. It was my emergency room voice, the one I used when a man was bleeding out on my table but his family was watching. Calm, competent, and completely fake. He took a single step into the apartment. His men did not move. He tilted his head, his gaze finally leaving my face to flick toward the pawn ticket on the table. "We're past helping. Miss Hart," he said, "your sister June's account is no longer in arrears. It has been moved to direct collections." I felt a bubble of pure, hysterical laughter rise in my throat. Direct collections. It sounded so sterile, so corporate, like he was here to repossess a toaster. I leaned against the kitchen counter, crossing my arms over my chest. The scrubs felt thin, useless. Direct collections. Got it. So, just curious. Do you guys take health insurance? Because I have got a decent PPO. The 2 walls of muscle behind him remained utterly stone-faced. But Adrian Vassallo? His lips did not move, But something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, or maybe just recognition. A dry, rasping sound, barely audible, escaped his throat. It might have been a laugh. "You have your sister's sense of humor," he observed. "The tone flat. It is not an asset." Before I could reply, my phone, sitting on the counter by the mail, vibrated violently. The screen lit up, June. My hand darted out. Snatching it up, I hit the green icon, my thumb pressing hard into the glass. "June, where are you? Are you okay?" Her voice was a shattered whisper, airless and frantic. "Lena, do not talk to them. Do not say anything. They will. Lena, they are not—" A click, a sound of a struggle, and then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, the screen now black, dead. He cut the call. A cold dread, colder than the Philly wind, washed over me. I looked up at Adrian Vassallo. His expression had not changed. He had not moved. He simply watched me process the information. He watched me understand. "Give her back," I said, the words low and hard. "That is not how this works," he replied, his voice gentle, which was somehow more terrifying. He took another step, gliding over the worn linoleum like he was on wheels. He was beside the small, rickety shelf where we kept our few photographs. He picked up a small, silver-plated frame. It was the last picture we had. All three of us, me at my nursing school graduation, June with her hair dyed electric blue, and our mother. Years before she got sick, we were all smiling. He studied the photo, his thumb tracing the edge of the frame. "She is a liability," he said, his voice thoughtful, as if discussing a poorly performing stock. He looked from the smiling girl in the photo to the frantic nurse standing in front of him. "She borrows what she cannot earn. She promises what she cannot deliver. She runs." He placed the frame back on the shelf, his movements precise, setting it down exactly where it had been. But he kept his gaze on me. He was close now. I could smell the wool of his suit, a faint trace of cedar, and something clean, like soap. "You, however," he said, his voice dropping an octave, "you do not run. You work double shifts in a war zone. You pay your bills. You anchor the chaos." He was so close I could see the flecks of a lighter brown in his dark eyes. He was not looking at me like a target. He was looking at me like a solution. "Forget your sister," he said, the words hitting me like a physical blow. "I am taking you." The world tilted. The air in my lungs turned to cement. He was not talking about money. He was not talking about a payment. This was not collections. This was collateral. My brain, my traitorous, triage-obsessed brain, bypassed panic and went straight to problem-solving. I could not fight him. His two men were still at the door, and he looked like he could break me in half without raising his heart rate. I could not run. He had June, so I had to negotiate. I had to buy time. "You cannot take me," I said, while forcing the words out. "I am not the debt. I am not June." "No," he agreed, his eyes never leaving mine. "You are better. You are reliable. The debt is high. Miss Hart, your sister was indiscreet. The interest is compounding. I require a guarantee. She is not a guarantee. You are... So this is what I am, your prisoner. You lock me in a basement." I tried to keep the tremor out of my voice. He almost smiled. "I do not have a basement, and you are a nurse, an emergency room nurse. Your value is not in being locked away. Your value is in your resilience." I had one card, it was a bluff, but it was all I had. "A payment plan?" I said, the words sharp. He raised an eyebrow. "You want a guarantee? Fine. You get a guarantee, but not me. You get money. I will pay you. I will work 4 shifts, 5 shifts. I will sell plasma. I do not care. I will get you the money, but you do not get me, and you do not get her." "The amount is substantial," he said, sounding bored. "I do not care," I repeated, "but I will not pay you 1 damn cent until I see my sister. You bring her here, safe. Before the sun comes up, you put her right here in this apartment, and I will sign whatever you want. I will work for the rest of my life, but you bring her home first." I held my breath. I had seen this before. the desperate negotiation in the family waiting room, the bargaining with God or with a surgeon. Today, my God was a mobster in a $3,000 suit. Adrian Vassallo was silent for a long moment. He looked at me, really looked at me, as if he were reading a complex chart, deciphering a new language. I could see the calculations clicking behind his eyes. 24 hours, he said. No, dawn. You said it yourself. She runs. You find her by dawn. You get your guarantee. He nodded once, a sharp, decisive movement. Before the sun, she is here. You sign. She is not. You come with me. You have my word, I said. He chuckled, a dark, humorless sound. Your word is not the currency we trade in, Lena, but your presence is... He reached into his suit jacket, but he did not pull out a pen. He pulled out a set of keys. They were old, worn, attached to a simple leather fob. He tossed them onto the table. They landed next to the pawn ticket with a heavy clink. What is this? A 1967 Chevrolet Impala. He said, it is parked downstairs. Black. You cannot miss it. I stared at the keys, confused. I do not understand. I do not like to wait, he said, turning for the door. We are going to find your sister, and you drive tonight. I am riding with you. He did not wait for an answer. He and his men were gone, evaporating from my doorway as silently as they had appeared. The only proof they had ever been there was the heavy silence, the looming deadline, and the cold metal keys on my table. I stood there for a full minute, the smell of his cedar soap warring with the lingering antiseptic on my scrubs. I picked up the keys. They were heavy in my palm. I finally understood. He had not come here to break my legs or trash my apartment. He had come here to take control, and in the space of 10 minutes, he had not just taken on June's debt. He had taken me. The money, I realized, had never been the point. The metal of the Impala keys was heavy, biting into my palm. It was an old-fashioned weight, real steel, not the plastic fob of a modern car. This was a key meant to turn a lock, to start an engine, to demand a response. It felt like a decision. My life, up until this point, had been a series of reactions. When you grow up in Camden, New Jersey, you learn that stability is a privilege, not a right. Our mother died when I was 12. It was a fast, ugly cancer that hollowed her out before we even learned how to pronounce the diagnosis. Her death left a vacuum, and in our house, vacuums were always filled by chaos. Our father was a good man, until he was not. He had a sickness, one that did not show up on a blood test. He was addicted to the spin of a wheel, the flip of a card. He gambled away the house, then the insurance money, then our childhood. I became the adult at 12 years old. I learned to read utility bills, how to stretch a box of macaroni into 3 meals, how to sign a permission slip with a passable forgery of our father's name. I became the anchor. June. She became the fire. She was 2 years younger, and she reacted to our mother's death by deciding the world was temporary. So why not burn bright? She was the wild spark, the graffiti tag on a clean wall, the spirit that refused to be anchored. While I was memorizing anatomy, she was memorizing freight train schedules to go paint. I chose medicine because I needed to fix things. I thought if I could just learn the systems, the anatomy, the pharmacology, I could stitch up the world's wounds. I thought I could control the bleeding. In the South Philly emergency room, control is an illusion, but it is a necessary one. I remember my first major trauma, a kid, maybe 19, caught in some gang territory dispute. He was bleeding out from a femoral artery nick. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely thread the suture. The resident, Dr. Bellows, was screaming for clamps, for blood, for a god he probably did not believe in. The kid on the table, his eyes wide with terror, was hyperventilating. He was going to code from panic before the blood loss. I did not know what to do, so I leaned in close, my shaky hand pressing gauze into the wound. "Hey," I said, my voice high and tight, "you like pizza? Because once we plug this, you are going to owe me a slice." Deep dish. I am talking Chicago style. His breathing hitched. He blinked, Chicago, he wheezed. That is trash. New York, only New York. He started arguing with me about crust. He stayed conscious. We saved him. I learned that night that you do not just treat the wound, you treat the person, and sometimes humor is the best suture you have. June never learned that control. She chose art, but the kind that gets you arrested. And with that, life came friends. Boyfriends who were brokers, managers, fixers, men who promised her gallery shows and instead delivered her to online betting sites. She was always chasing the next big score, the big break. She had our father's sickness, just a different delivery system. About 6 months ago, she came to me, tears, mascara running, the whole 9 yards. She was in debt, deep debt, something about a studio space, a hot loan she took to cover the deposit. The interest was compounding. I did not know what compounding meant in her world. I do now. I sat her down at that same kitchen table. I got out a ledger. I made her write down a payment plan, how much she earned from her craft market sales, how much we could spare from my check. I was tough. I was the anchor. She hugged me, her thin body trembling. She buried her face in my scrubs. It is going to be okay, Lena, she promised me, which was laughable. I was the one who was supposed to say that. I promise. I will make this right. Her promises, they were like her art, bright, beautiful, and gone by morning. I thought I knew the contours of her world. I thought it was just bad boyfriends and artsy dreams. I did not know about men like Adrian Vassallo. I knew the name, though everyone at the hospital knew the Vassallo name. It was whispered in the corridors, usually after a specific kind of patient came in, the kind who arrived by private car, not ambulance, the kind who had gunshot wounds but no police report. The Vassallo family was an empire, or so the stories went, half legitimate, half shadow. They owned real estate, a massive logistics company that controlled a piece of the port, and, confusingly, they sponsored a charity gala every spring. The gala raised millions for community health clinics like the one I had interned at. They were part of the city's anatomy. You could not cut them out without killing the patient. I had seen him once before, Adrian Vassallo. I did not know his name then, but I knew his face. It was last winter. Cold. A biting rain that felt like needles. I was leaving my shift, and a funeral was letting out at the Catholic church across the street. It was a small affair, but the men in dark suits were unmistakable. He was not with them, and he was standing across the street near the bus stop. Under no umbrella, the rain was plastering his dark hair to his skull. He was just watching. He held a spray of white flowers. Just white, simple, elegant, and stark against his black overcoat. He did not go in. He did not join the mourners. He just stood in the rain, a sentinel. When the hearse pulled away, he waited. Then he walked over, placed the white flowers on the wet church steps, and turned. He saw me watching him from the hospital doors. I was just another nurse in scrubs. He did not pause. He did not react. He just held my gaze for a beat, an assessment, and then he was gone, swallowed by the gray city. I did not think of him again. Why would I? He was from a different world, a different species. I was immune to men like that, men who used stillness as a weapon and wore suits that cost more than my car. I was a fixer, a healer. I worked in the light, even if it was the harsh fluorescent light of an emergency room. I was wrong. I looked at the keys in my hand, 1967, a heavy, solid piece of American history. I was not immune. I was not the shepherd. I was just another person with a wound, and the wolf was not just at the door. He was waiting for me in the car. He had the keys to my sister, and he had just given me the keys to his. The driver's seat of a 1967 Impala is a different universe from my 10-year-old hatchback. The bench seat was wide, the black leather cracked but clean. The steering wheel was thin, almost delicate, but connected to what felt like a ton of American steel. When I turned the key, the engine did not just start, it woke up. A low, rumbling thump that vibrated in my chest. I was still in my scrubs, smelling of antiseptic and someone else's misfortune. Adrian Vassallo did not get in the back. His men, The two silent walls of muscle got into a black Suburban that was parked behind the Impala, its engine already running, its presence a silent threat. Adrian himself opened the passenger door and slid onto the bench seat. He was too large for the car, or maybe the car was just too old. He filled the space. That smell of cedar and clean soap was back, cutting through the car's scent of old vinyl and gasoline. "Where to?" Nursey asked, his voice calm, as if we were going for ice cream. I gripped the wheel. "How would I know she is your debtor?" "She is your sister," he countered, not a hint of irritation in his voice. He was not going to give me anything. He was waiting. Testing. I closed my eyes for a second, forcing the ER triage mode to take over. Okay. Patient June, symptoms missing, terrified, in debt to the mob, vitals unknown. Last known location our apartment, where she left a pawn ticket. I put the car in drive. The Impala moved like a boat, smooth and heavy. "The pawn ticket," I said. My voice clipped. "She hawked our mother's necklace. She only does that when she is at absolute zero. And when she is at zero, she always goes to the same place. A guy she knows. She thinks he is her friend. He's a bookie." "And this friend has a name?" Adrian asked, his gaze fixed forward, out the windshield, as if he were admiring the lovely South Philly night. "I do not know his name. I know his location. Fishtown. Under the L." Adrian just nodded, a slight incline of his head, as if I had confirmed something he already knew. We drove. The Suburban stayed 2 car lengths behind, a loyal, menacing shadow. Driving with him next to me was like driving with a sleeping panther. The potential for violence was so thick in the air, it was hard to breathe. He did not talk. He just sat, his large hands resting on his knees, his presence a weight on the passenger seat. Fishtown was a mess of old industry and new condos, a war for the neighborhood's soul. I knew the spot. It was an old warehouse, pretending to be a derelict textile mill. But on a Tuesday night, the side door was always propped open by a single brick. I parked the Impala a block away, in the shadow of a rusted-out bridge. "This is it." He looked at the building, then at me. "You will wait here." I laughed, a short, sharp, ugly sound. "You must be joking. You have my sister." "I am not waiting anywhere. You wanted me to drive, I drove. Now I am the guarantee. I go where my guarantee is." His eyes narrowed. That was the first flicker of something. He was not used to being argued with. He studied me for a long beat, the silence stretching. "If you slow me down," he said, his voice flat, "I will have one of my men put you back in this car. Do you understand?" "I am an ER nurse," I said, pulling my own keys from my scrub pocket and jangling them. "I am used to moving fast, and I am used to blood. I will not slow you down, but I am coming." He got out of the car. He did not wait for me. I had to almost jog to keep up, my sneakers silent on the cracked pavement. His men were suddenly there, flanking us. They moved like ghosts. The side door led to a concrete stairwell that smelled of stale beer and urine. It opened into a vast, cavernous room. It was a club, but not the kind with flashing lights. This was a place for shadows. The air was thick with smoke, and the only real light came from clusters of monitors on the far wall, all showing different sporting events, odds flashing in green, men in cheap suits and women in clothes that were too tight for the weather huddled around low tables. The sound was a low din of murmurs, the click of chips, the slosh of liquid. And then I saw her. June was not at a table. She was in a small, glass-enclosed office in the back, sitting on a metal stool. A man was standing in front of her, his back to us. He was big, wearing a stained white tank top, his arms a road map of bad tattoos. He was leaning in, his hand on her knee. My vision went red. I started forward, but a hand shot out, grabbing my arm. Adrian's grip was like a steel clamp. He did not even look at me. His eyes were on the office. "That," he said, his voice a low growl, "is Russo." "Get his hands off her," I snarled, trying to pull my arm free. "Patience, nurse," he whispered. And then he walked forward. The way he moved, it was like a change in barometric pressure. The murmuring did not stop, but it changed. People saw him, they moved, they made a path, the two walls of muscle flanked him, and I slipped in right behind his shoulder, using his bulk as a shield. He did not knock on the office door, he just opened it. The man, Russo, spun around, his face a mask of surprise that quickly curdled into anger. "Who the hell are you? This is a private—" His voice died when he saw Adrian. His eyes widened. He knew that face. "Vassallo," Russo breathed, taking a half step back, his hand falling from June's knee. June looked up. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and glassy. "Lena, oh God, Lena, no!" "Adrian Vassallo," Russo said, puffing his chest out, trying to regain the ground he had lost. "You are a long way from your fancy port. We got no business." "You do now," Adrian said, his voice smooth. He ignored Russo and looked at June. He assessed her, the way I would assess a patient. He saw the pupils, the tremor in her hands. June Hart. "She is with me," Russo said, Yaori stepping forward. "She has got an outstanding marker, a big one. She is collateral until the payout on the Sixers game." "The Sixers game was fixed," Adrian said, his tone casual. "The payout is not coming, which means your marker is worthless. You are holding damaged goods. Russo." "That is not for you to say," Russo spat. "I am saying it," Adrian replied, when he took a step, closing the distance. He was taller than Russo, but it was not about height. It was about density. Adrian seemed to occupy more space. "I am here to absorb the asset. Her debt is now with me." "Absorb," Russo laughed, but it was a nervous sound. "You cannot just walk in here and— I paid good money to her bookie. She owes me. That is the rule." "I am not here to argue rules. Russo, I am here to buy her. Name your price. What did you pay for her marker?" Russo's eyes darted between us. He was calculating. 20,000 cash, plus interest. "You are a liar," Adrian said simply. "You paid 10, tops, and the interest is void. I am buying the principal." He reached into his coat and pulled out a slim, black leather wallet. He did not pull out cash. He pulled out a single, black business card. His own? He tossed it on the desk. "What is this?" Russo sneered. "That is my marker," Adrian said. "I am buying her debt, and I am putting up my own collateral. You can call the number on the back of that card. It will take you to my accounts payable. Tell them you have a $10,000 credit." Russo stared at the card. Looked like he wanted to spit. He was being outmaneuvered. Publicly. "And what is the guarantee?" Russo pressed, trying to find an angle. "How do I know this is not just— you?" Adrian turned his head, just slightly, and his dark eyes found me. I was still standing in the doorway, vibrating with a mixture of rage and terror. He pointed a finger, not at June, at me. "Her," he said, "I am leaving a deposit. Lena Hart, she is my guarantee." The room went silent. Russo stared at me, his piggish eyes raking over my scrubs. He was not looking at a nurse. He was looking at a price tag. Her Russo licked his lips. "She is the guarantee. She does not look like much." Before I could speak, Adrian said, "She is enough." He turned back to Russo. "The deal is done. Get her. We are leaving." Russo glared, then nodded, a sharp, angry jerk of his head. He grabbed June by the arm, yanking her off the stool. "Get out!" June stumbled, falling against me. She was shaking so hard her teeth were chattering. "Lena, I am sorry. I am so sorry." "Shut up, June," I whispered, propping her up. We were in the main room now, the crowd parting for us again. Adrian was leading the way. He paused at the bar, next to a guy on a stool who had not looked up once. Adrian turned to me, his face unreadable in the dim light. "How do you value yourself?" Nursey asked, his voice low. "Just for me." My adrenaline was so high I felt lightheaded. "What?" "Your value. You are my guarantee. So, what are you worth?" I met his gaze. I was not going to be some trinket in his negotiation ER rates. I said, my voice clear and cold. "We charge double for nights. We charge triple if you are an idiot. And if you bleed on the floor, the cleaning fee is astronomical. So, right now, At whatever o'clock in the morning, I am very, very expensive. His lips twitched. That ghost of a smile again. Good to know. He let us out into the damp Philly night. The Suburban was waiting at the curb, the engine humming. One of his men opened the back door. "Put her in. Adrian ordered me." I helped June into the back of the Suburban. She curled into a ball, instantly. "Lena, do not leave me," she whimpered. "I am not. I looked at Adrian, who was waiting by the open door of the Impala. "What now?" "Now," he said. "We formalize the arrangement." The drive was silent. We were not going to my apartment. We were heading toward the bridge, toward the glittering, impersonal lights of Center City. He directed me into a private garage beneath a skyscraper that pierced the clouds. The penthouse was empty. Not poor, but empty. It was a vast expanse of gray marble, black leather, and glass. The walls were all windows, looking down on the city like a map of glowing circuits. It smelled like nothing. Not cedar, not soap, just clean, cold air. June had been taken by one of the men, presumably to a different room. Now it was just us. "The deal," Adrian said, standing in front of the window, his silhouette stark against the lights. "Rousseau, and men like him, are an escalation. They are messy, bad for business. They are now aware that June Hart, and by extension her debt, is my property. They will not touch her again." "So you bought her?" "I bought her debt," he corrected, "which now resides with me. But the guarantee remains. I need to ensure there are no more surprises, no more escalations from your end." "I do not create escalations, I solve them." "You are one by just existing," he said. "So, here is the offer. Your sister is free. Her debt to me is frozen. In exchange, you will stay here, with me, for 30 days, as my guest, to ensure the transfer of assets is smooth, to ensure everyone behaves." "My guest," I repeated, "like a prisoner." "Guests can leave. Prisoners cannot. But if you leave, the guarantee is broken. Rousseau will be informed. Your sister's debt will be reactivated, with penalties, and I will collect, directly, from you. 30 days, in this glass box, and in these 30 days, what am I? Your maid, your chef, your—" I could not say the word. He turned from the window. His face was in shadow, but I could feel the intensity of his gaze. "You are my guarantee," he said. "You are not my maid. You are not my whore. You are my house guest." I crossed my arms. "Conditions." He raised an eyebrow. "I have two. One, no sex. This is not that. I am not that. Well, you do not touch me." "Agreed," he said, almost too quickly. 2, I keep my job. I am a nurse. I have shifts. I am not losing my license because you are playing mob boss." He was silent for a new, "Your job is messy. It puts you at risk." "My job is my job. It is not negotiable. You want me? You get the nurse. You get the scrubs, the night shifts, and the smell of antiseptic. That is the deal." He stared at me, and I could see the gears turning. He was deciding. "Fine," he said, "you keep your job, with one condition of my own." "Which is?" "I control your safety," he said. "You go to work. You come back. You do not go anywhere else. You do not see anyone else. You are here, or you are at the hospital. And when you travel between them, my men will drive you." "I drove tonight," I pointed out. "That was a test," he said, "which you passed. But it is not a test I am willing to take again. My men drive. That is my condition." I hated it. I hated all of it. But I looked at the marble floor, and I thought of June, probably sleeping for the first time in days. I thought of Rousseau's hands on her. 30 days, I said, my voice a hollow echo in the huge room. 30 days, he confirmed. We did not shake on it. The drive back to my apartment to get June was a blur. One of his men drove the Impala. I rode in the back of the Suburban with June, who was sleeping off a tranquilizer a doctor of Adrian's had apparently given her. I felt hollowed out, debrided. We were almost at my building when I saw it in the side mirror. A dark sedan, a Ford, with tinted windows. It had been with us for 6 blocks. "That car," I said to the driver, a thick-necked man named Marco. He glanced in the mirror. "I see him." The sedan sped up, pulling into the lane beside us. "Take the turn," I said, my voice sharp. "Lady, I know how to drive." "Take the next right, now. It is a one-way ambulance lane. It cuts through to Broad Street." Marco looked at me, surprised. "Do it," I yelled. He wrenched the wheel. The Suburban lurched, tires squealing as we shot down a narrow, dark alley I knew like the back of my hand. The sedan tried to follow, but it was too wide, or the driver was too slow. We heard the sickening sound of metal scraping brick. We burst out onto Broad Street, merging into the late-night traffic. I looked back. The sedan was gone. The car was silent for a moment, just the hum of the engine. I looked in the front. Marco was looking at me in the rearview mirror. His expression was no longer bored. I settled back in my seat, my heart hammering. I looked out the window at the city flying by. It was the same city, the same streets, but it was not. I had just placed my foot into a different world, a world with different rules, a different ecosystem, and I had a feeling the predators here were much, much larger. I was no longer just a nurse trying to save my sister. I was a guarantee. I was collateral, and I had just shown my teeth, not to the wolf, but to his driver. Everything had changed. Living in Adrian Vassallo's penthouse was like living in a high-end sensory deprivation tank. The floors were gray marble, the furniture was black leather, and the air was chilled to a precise, unwavering temperature. There were no stacks of mail, no dusty art supplies, no personal clutter. The only sign of a human inhabitant was a collection of stark, black and white photographs that covered one entire wall. They were not photos of people. They were photos of the port cranes like skeletal dinosaurs, container ships in the fog, the dark, churning water of the Delaware River. It was a landscape of cold, massive power. I could not sleep there. My body, accustomed to the adrenaline-fueled chaos of the emergency room followed by the cramped, noisy reality of my apartment, rejected the sterile silence. I would lie awake on a mattress that probably cost more than my nursing degree, listening to the hum of the city 28 floors below. On the third night, I gave up. I padded out of the guest suite, my bare feet cold on the marble. I found him in the kitchen, a vast expanse of stainless steel and black granite. He was not sleeping either. He was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking down at the city he apparently owned. He did not turn, but he spoke. "You are a quiet walker, nurse." "You are a light sleeper. Collector," I countered. He turned then, when he was in a simple black t-shirt and gray sweatpants. It was the first time I had seen him in anything but a suit. The change was disarming. The clothes were soft, but the man was not. "You cannot sleep," he stated. "I am used to noise." I said, "Sirens, shouting, the coffee machine breaking. This place, it is too quiet. It makes my ears ring." He considered this for a long moment. Then he moved to the high-tech stove, his movements economical and precise. He opened a refrigerator that was as empty as the apartment. Save for a few bottles of water and a carton of milk, he found a tin of cocoa in a deep, dark cupboard. "My grandmother," he said, his voice quiet as he poured milk into a small, heavy saucepan. "She was an immigrant from the old country. She said a house was not a home until it smelled of cooking. She said quiet was for graveyards, not for living." He did not look at me as he spoke. He just focused on stirring the milk, watching it so it would not scald. He told me about a woman who came to South Philly with nothing, who built a small bakery into a community hub, who knew the name of every cop, politician, and priest in the neighborhood. He talked about her, not about himself. But I understood. He was telling me where he came from. He poured the hot cocoa into a heavy ceramic mug and slid it across the island to me. He did not have one himself. He just watched me. "Thank you," I said. The warmth felt good in my hands. "Sleep is a necessity, Lena," he said, using my first name for the first time. It sounded strange in his mouth. "Your performance at your job depends on it. I cannot have my guarantee collapsing from exhaustion." And just like that, the moment was over. The wall was back up. He was not a man sharing a memory. He was a manager checking on his asset. My new life was a study in contradictions. Marco, the thick-necked driver who I now knew had been with Adrian for 10 years, would drive me to the hospital in a gleaming black Suburban. He would park in the ambulance bay, ignoring the glares from the paramedics. I would walk into the ER, clock in, and spend 12 hours stitching up gunshot wounds, setting broken bones, and dealing with the constant grinding, human misery of the city. Then I would walk out, my scrubs stained, and Marco would be there, holding a bottle of water and a fresh scrub top for me to change into. He would drive me back to the silent glass box in the sky. The worlds were not supposed to touch, but they were bleeding into each other. One day, I was transferring a non-critical patient to a community clinic, the one I had interned at. As we wheeled the gurney in, I saw it, a new bronze plaque on the wall of the waiting room, the Vassallo Family Foundation, Critical Care Wing. The money was clean, the plaque was clean, but I knew it was funded by the same engine that had sent Russo to collect my sister, the same engine that was now holding me prisoner. Adrian was not just breaking the city. He was patching its holes. He was using his gray, tainted money to do the work the city government could not, or would not. He was treating the symptom, but he was also the disease. Then came the text from June. I was in the middle of a shift, trying to get a line into a collapsing vein. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I checked it in the break room. Just a small one, Lena. For fun. I won. Look. It was a screenshot of an online sports betting site, a small, 3-figure win. But it was not the win that mattered. It was the bet. She was back in. A cold, familiar dread washed over me. I had hidden June away. Adrian had found her a quiet place upstate, a clinic that was probably more of a resort, to recover. He had kept his word, and she was already relapsing. I could not tell him. If I told him, he would see her as a broken asset. He would declare the debt unpayable. It would prove him right. I would lose what little ground I had. I had to fix it myself. I knew, from whispers in the ER, about the city's other systems, the ones that ran parallel to ours. I did not need a cop. I needed a specialist. Her name was Mara. She was a legend in the ER, a former patient who had been brought in after a coding accident and had repaid the doctor who saved her by fixing his student loan debt permanently. I found Mara in the basement of a 24-hour gaming cafe, surrounded by a fortress of humming computer towers. She was small, with neon pink hair, and she was drinking a Red Bull that was almost as big as her head. I am not a doctor, I told her, sitting down, but I am a nurse, and I need you to erase someone. She did not look up from her 3 monitors. I do not kill people. Online. I said, I need you to erase my sister from every betting site, every credit line, every marker system. I want her to be a financial ghost. When a bookie types her name, I want it to come up empty. Mara finally looked at me. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and utterly without sentiment. That is not an erasure. That is a deep clean. It costs... What is the price? You work at the hospital. The big one. I need a favor. I need access to a name in your system just to look, not to touch. No, I said immediately. I will not violate patient privacy. Mara sighed, cracking her knuckles. Fine. Then it costs money. A lot, $5,000, and I need a different kind of favor. Information. You are living with the big guy. Vassallo. The whole street knows. The nurse in the glass tower. My blood ran cold. I do not care what you are, she said. I just care that you have access. I need to know what he knows about the port expansion deal. Specifically, the data cabling contracts. I cannot do that. Then you cannot get your sister cleaned. We stared at each other. I will give you the 5,000, I said, my mind racing, calculating my paycheck, my savings, and I will give you this. I wrote down Russo's name. He's a problem. He is connected to a bookie. Maybe you can find something that makes him a ghost instead. Mara's eyes lit up. You are trading up. I like that. She typed his name. Okay, I will see what I can do for your sister. But Lena, you are playing in a league you do not understand. You better learn the rules fast. I was learning. I just did not know the game was about to be ambushed. I do not know who tipped them off. Maybe Russo, maybe Mara, maybe someone I had not even met. I was on my way to a supply warehouse near the port, a place I had arranged to sell my old car for cash to pay Mara. It was a stupid, desperate move. I got out of my hatchback, and they were just there. Two men, not in suits. These were not Adrian's men. These were street-level, cheap jackets, dead eyes. "Nice of you to come, nurse," one of them said. My heart hammered. I did not have a weapon. I had my scrubs, my keys, my phone. I was in a vast container yard. I had to think. Triage. "I think you have the wrong person," I said, backing away. "No, we got the right one. Russo is real unhappy, and we hear his boss is even unhappier. You are the message." They lunged. I threw my hot coffee in the first one's face. He screamed. The second one grabbed me, his arm locking around my throat. I stomped on his instep, and when he grunted, I jammed my elbow backward into his solar plexus. He lost his grip, and I was running. I ran not toward the exit, but toward the cranes, into the maze of stacked 20-ton steel boxes. I could hear them crashing after me. I ducked into a narrow space, my back against the cold, corrugated steel. I was trapped. Dead end. But to my left, there was a control booth for a yard crane. The door was unlocked. I scrambled inside, slamming the heavy steel door. I heard them pounding on it. The window was reinforced glass, but it would not hold. I looked at the control panel. It was a mess of levers and buttons, but one button was huge, red and covered by a plastic cap. Emergency stop release. I did not hesitate. I flipped the cap and slammed my palm onto the button. The world exploded in sound, a massive, groaning shriek of metal, followed by a thud that shook the entire yard. I had not stopped the crane. I had released the electromagnetic lock, the 40-foot container that had been dangling 30 feet in the air. Right above the alley I had run from, dropped. It landed with a sound like a bomb, crushing the concrete and blocking the entire lane. The pounding on my door stopped. I heard panicked, muffled shouting, then silence. My hands were shaking. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were numb. I pressed number 2 on my speed dial. He had made me program it. He answered on the first ring. He did not say hello. "Vassallo? I am at the Pier 72 container yard," I said, my voice sounding distant, "and I have a problem." "Are you hurt?" His voice was sharp. "No. But I think I just dropped a container on someone. You should send a cleanup crew. The ones who are good at cleaning." There was a pause, a long, heavy silence. When he spoke, his voice was different, tighter, colder. "Do not move. I am 5 minutes away." He was there in 3. The Suburban screeched to a halt, and he was out before it stopped moving. His hair was undone, his suit jacket missing. He looked wild. He wrenched the cab door open and pulled me out, his hands gripping my arms so tightly they hurt. He did not yell. He was scanning me, his eyes checking for injuries, for blood. "What happened?" he growled. "They were waiting for me, 2 of them. They said Russo was unhappy." He saw the coffee stain on my scrub top, the way I was shaking. He looked past me at the massive blue container that was now blocking the path, angled absurdly where it had fallen. He looked at the control cab, and he looked back at me. His anger was a physical thing, a wave of heat, but under it, I saw something else. It was not pride, it was recognition. He was looking at me like I was not a problem, but a solution. "You did this?" he asked, his voice low. I hit the red button. I whispered. He closed his eyes, ran a hand over his face. "Get in the car. Lena." The ride back was silent. I was shaking from the adrenaline dump. He did not speak, but as we sat in the quiet, dark car, he reached over to the passenger side controls, and I felt a sudden rush of warmth. He had turned on the foot warmer. It was such a small, absurdly domestic and tender gesture that it almost made me cry. Later that week, He came home late. I was in the kitchen, reading a medical journal. He walked past me, heading for the bar, but he was moving stiffly. "You are favoring your left side," I said. He stopped. "I am fine." "You are not. You are listing, and you are bleeding." I pointed at his hand. His knuckles were raw, and a thin line of blood was dripping from a cut on his palm. He looked at his hand as if it belonged to someone else. I sighed. I went to the guest bathroom and got my personal first aid kit, the one I kept in my car. "Sit down, Adrian." He sat at the kitchen island. I turned on the light, flooding us in sterile brightness. I cleaned the wound. It was a sharp cut, probably from a knife. He did not flinch as the antiseptic stung. "You need sutures." I said that. "No." He said, "Yes, you will get an infection. This is a dirty wound." "I do not like needles." I almost laughed. The man who controlled the city's underworld was afraid of a 2-inch needle. Tough. Hold still. I was all business. I numbed the area. I prepped a sterile field on his billion-dollar marble island. I laid out my sutures. My hands were steady. He watched my face, not my hand. "Why?" he asked, his voice soft. "Why am I stitching you? Because if you get sepsis and die, my 30 days are up, and I do not trust your men to honor the deal," I said, tying off the first knot. "No," he said. "Why did he choose you?" I paused, the suture needle halfway through. "Who?" "The patient. The John Doe, the one you got the hard drive from." My blood froze. The world stopped. I had not told anyone. I had not even looked at the drive. It was hidden in a tampon applicator in my locker at the hospital. "How do you know about that?" I whispered. "I know everything that happens in your hospital. Lena, I funded the wing. Remember, I put in the new security system." He watched me, his dark eyes missing nothing. A man is shot, multiple times. He knows he is dying. He has a choice. He could give the drive to a cop, to a doctor, to another player, but he gave it to you. Why? I finished the last stitch, my hands on autopilot. I cut the thread. "I do not know," I said, my voice shaky. He was crashing. He just looked at me. He said, "Not a cop, not Vassallo. You, the fixer." Then he gave it to me. I had been so focused on the ambush, on June, that I had almost forgotten the small, cold piece of metal in my locker, the last act of a dying man. Adrian was silent for a long time. I was bandaging his hand, my fingers brushing his. The promise of no sex was a thin, brittle thing between us. It was not about sex. It was about this tension, this pull, this weird, dark intimacy of stitching a man's wounds on a kitchen counter at 2 a.m. "He gave it to you," Adrian said, flexing his bandaged hand, "because you are not afraid, and because you look at the world like a wound. You do not just want to patch the patient. Lena, you want to cure the whole disease. You want to fix the system." He stood up, his presence looming over me. "And that," he said, his voice a low rumble, "is why I chose you, too." I realized my hand was still resting on his. I pulled it back like I had been burned. I knew what was on that drive. Even without looking, it was not just a patient's last words. It was a ledger. It was the evidence. It was the thing that connected Russo, the corrupt police chief Kincaid, and the state senator who was always on television preaching about his anti-drug campaign. And a dying man had just made me the curator of it all. The hard drive in my locker was a ticking time bomb, and I had been carrying it for a week. I had not told Adrian. I had not told anyone, but he knew. He knew about the dying man, and he knew about the drive. And now, someone else did, too. The text message was not from June. It was a picture. June, strapped to a metal chair, her face bruised, her eyes wide with a terror that was all too familiar. The background was dark, wet, and industrial. The text below it was simple: Pier 68, midnight, bring the accountant's data, come alone, nurse. Or your sister learns how to swim with her feet tied. It was signed Russo. I dropped the phone. My hands were not shaking, they were cold, ice cold. This was not a negotiation. It was a surgical extraction. I walked out of my room. Adrian was in the main living area, on the phone, his back to me. He was speaking in rapid, low Italian. I did not need to understand the words to hear the anger. "They have her," I said. He stopped, mid-word. He ended the call without saying goodbye and turned to face me. His face was a mask of cold fury. He had already known. He had been waiting for them to make a move. "Pier 68, midnight. He wants the drive." "He will not get it," Adrian said, his voice flat. "Yes, he will," I said, walking past him, grabbing my coat. "He will get the drive, but he will not get to keep it. This is not your world. Adrian, this is mine. This is triage. This is damage control. And I have a plan." He followed me, grabbing his own coat. "My men," "Your men, your name, your crew. They are the reason Russo is doing this. He's trying to force a war, or a partnership. You show up with your soldiers. And June is the first casualty. She is the acceptable loss, not to me." "So what is your plan? Nurse, you are going to go alone." "Almost." I said, I was already dialing, "I am going with a ghost." Mara's gaming cafe was loud, all pings and digital gunfire. She did not look up when we walked in. Adrian, in his suit, looked like a predator in a petting zoo. "I need a dead man's switch," I said, slamming my hands on her desk. Mara finally looked up. She saw Adrian, and her eyes widened for half a second before her professional boredom snapped back into place. "You are making friends in high places. Nurse, what kind of switch?" "The hard drive," I said. "The ledger, I am giving it to them, but you are going to stream it. A live feed. The data goes to, I do not know. The cloud, everywhere. The second I'm in trouble. You hit the go button. The whole network. Kincaid, the senator, Russo, it all goes public." Mara leaned back, whistling. "That is a big play. That is a suicide play." "No," Adrian said, his voice heavy. "It is not, because my men will be there, not as vassallo, as ghosts. They will be on the perimeter. They will clean the exits, but they will not engage unless I give the word. It is a clean team." I looked at him, surprised. He was adapting. "One more thing," I said, looking back at Mara. "I need a microphone, a good one. Something I can wear that will broadcast to a recorder. I want every word." Mara grinned, a flash of silver piercings. "You do not want a dead man's switch. Lena, you want an autopsy. You want to record the cause of death. I can do that." Pier 68 was a skeleton of old industry, a rotten tooth jutting into the Delaware River. The rain was coming down in icy sheets, driven by a wind that screamed. It was perfect. No witnesses. I walked out onto the pier, alone. I was wearing a wire. Mara was listening, a block away in a van. Adrian was somewhere in the shadows, a ghost, his team of ghosts moving through the darkness around us. I was the bait. I saw them. At the far end of the pier, June was tied to a piling, a piece of duct tape over her mouth. Russo was there, flanked by 2 of his men, but they were not in charge. Police Chief Kincaid was there, his blue uniform soaked, his face grim, and next to him, under a large black umbrella held by a driver, was State Senator Harrison. He was the one on all the billboards, the family values, drug-free Philly guy. And I knew, in that instant, he was the one the dying man had been running from. "The nurse," Senator Harrison said, his voice smooth and political. "Right on time. I admire punctuality. Do you have it?" "Where is the doctor?" Kincaid growled, his hand on his holstered weapon. What I said, confused. "The doctor. Your boyfriend. Vassallo. We know you're with him. Where is he?" "I came alone," I said, my voice shaking just the right amount. "Like you said." Russo laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "She's a good liar." "Get June," I said, my hand tightening on the hard drive in my pocket. "Let her go. You can have the drive." "That is not how this works," the senator said. Stepping forward, the rain dripped from his umbrella. "This is a systemic problem, nurse. And we are the solution. First, the data. Then, we discuss your sister's prognosis." I pulled the drive out. I held it up. It is right here. All of it. The accounts, the shipments, the ledger, Kincaid's payments, your payments, Senator. Kincaid took a step forward, his eyes burning. That is a problem, Senator Harrison said, sighing. She is a problem. And then, a new voice, cold and quiet, cut through the rain. She is not the problem, Uncle. Adrian stepped out of the shadows. He was not wearing a coat, and he was just in his suit, the rain plastering his hair to his head, just like it had been outside the church. He looked beautiful and terrifying. Senator Harrison's face went white. Adrian, my boy, what are you doing here? This is not your concern. This is pest control. Uncle, I whispered, my blood turning to ice. He is my father's brother, Adrian said, his eyes locked on the senator. He is the one who put me in charge. He is the one who told me to build the shield so he could operate in the shadow. I gave you an empire, Adrian the senator shouted over the wind. I gave you the port. I gave you this city, and you bring this nurse into our family business. She is not the one who betrayed the family, Adrian said. It happened fast. Triage fast. Kincaid saw it. He saw the betrayal. He saw his world ending. He was not a politician. He was a cop. He knew how to clean up a scene. He drew his service weapon. He did not aim at me. He did not aim at Adrian. He aimed at Russo. No witnesses, Kincaid yelled, and fired. Russo grunted and, clutching his stomach as the first shot hit, Kincaid raised the gun again, to finish it. But I was already moving. I grabbed a rusted metal gaff hook from the piling and threw it. All my weight, all my rage, it spun, end over end, and slammed into Kintin's shoulder. He screamed, and his second shot went wide, shattering the night. June, jump, I screamed. I did not wait to see if she would. I launched myself at her, cutting the tape on her mouth with the scalpel I had in my pocket. I grabbed the ropes on her wrists, and I did not try to untie them. I used her as leverage, tackling her. We went over the side of the pier, a tangled mess of limbs, into the black, icy water. The shock of the cold was a physical blow, but we did not hit the water. Thud! We landed hard on a flat, moving surface, a barge. It was anchored just below the pier, invisible in the dark, Adrian's plan, his safety net. A second later, he landed beside us. Light as a panther, he had not hesitated. He had followed me. Get her free, he growled, pulling a knife and slicing June's ropes. Above us, the pier was chaos, gunfire, shouting. I did not wait. I pulled my phone, the one Mara had given me. It was waterproof. I hit record. I scrambled up the ladder, back onto the pier. Adrian yelled my name. Lena, stop. But I was an ER nurse. I do not stop. The scene was chaos. Adrian's ghosts had emerged. They were disarming Kincaid's men. Russo was on the ground, bleeding out, his hands clutching his stomach. Kincaid was on his knees, his arm bleeding. The senator was staring, his perfect world collapsing. I walked up to Russo. I put the phone in his face, the camera light blinding him. You are going to die, Russo, I said, my voice clear and cold, my medical voice. That is a gut shot. You are bleeding internally. You have, maybe, 10 minutes. He gurgled, looking at me with wide, panicked eyes. But I can save you. I can pack the wound. I can stop the bleeding long enough for an ambulance. If you give me the key. Key, he choked. The crypto wallet, the one on the drive. It is encrypted. I need the key. Give me the key, and I will save your life. Keep it, and you die here in the rain. He stared at me. He thought I was bluffing. You think justice is a straight line? You bitch, he spat, blood on his lips. No, I said, pressing the phone closer. It is a vital sign, and yours is dropping. The key, Russo, now. He gasped, a terrible, wet sound, and then he read the numbers. A string of 16 digits. I did not blink. I just recorded. When he was done, I stood up. I did not touch him. I walked away. I turned to the senator. He was looking at his nephew, his face a mask of pure hatred. You were a shield. Adrian, he screamed. You were meant to protect me. Adrian looked at me. his eyes full of something I could not name, regret, apology. And then he looked at his uncle. "It is over," Adrian said. He took out his own phone. He hit a button. He was not calling anyone, he was recording. "My name is Adrian Vassallo. For the last 5 years, I have operated as the head of the Vassallo family. My uncle, Senator Harrison Vassallo, used me. He built my organization as a front, a way to laze under his money. The drugs, the payoffs, it was him. Kincaid was his. Russo was his. I have a full confession. I will give it to the federal authorities in exchange. I want conditional immunity for Lena Hart. She is a witness. She was my hostage. She is not a participant. He was sacrificing himself, his entire empire, for me." And just as he finished, the night exploded in light, red and blue, sirens, not just Philly cops, but federal, the FBI, Mara. She had not just set up a dead man's switch, she had tipped them off. Kincaid saw them. Russo was groaning. It was over. Senator Harrison Vassallo looked at the incoming swarm of federal agents. He looked at his nephew. He looked at me, the nurse with the camera. He knew that a trial would end him. He was a man who always controlled the narrative. He was not going to let us write his ending. He reached into his jacket, not for a confession, for a small silver pistol. Adrian saw it. "Why, no." But the senator did not aim it at us. He put it to his own temple. The shot was small, almost lost in the wail of the sirens. He collapsed onto the wet pier. Adrian froze. The federal agents were screaming. June was crying. I ran to him. I dropped to my knees, my hands immediately going to the wound. It was a through and through. "No," I yelled, my voice raw. "You do not get to die. You do not get to escape. He has to live. We need the testimony." I pressed my hands to the exit wound, trying to staunch the bleeding. "Get me a kit. Stat, I need a pressure bandage. I need a real ambulance." Now he does not die. Not tonight. I was keeping the monster alive, because justice was not about revenge. It was about the truth. It was about the charts. It was about keeping the patient stable long enough for the system to finally do its job. The world did not stop. That is the first lesson you learn in the emergency room. A life ends. A new one begins. And someone else is still complaining about the vending machine being out of pretzels. The rain on Pier 68 had barely dried before the story exploded, and I was at the center of it. I did not keep the monster alive for long. Senator Harrison Vassallo, my patient, made it to the trauma bay at my own hospital. I had handed him off, my hands covered in his blood, my voice hoarse from yelling his vitals. He was stable. I had done my job. He stabilized, went into surgery, and 3 days later, in the intensive care unit, he had a sudden, untreatable complication, a stroke, and he was brain dead. He would never testify. He escaped us all. But the hard drive, and Russo's crypto key, and Adrian's full confession, those did not escape. The media, starved for a narrative, devoured us. They did not know what to do with Adrian, the confessing mob boss who was also the victim of his uncle's political machine. They did not know what to do with a corrupt police chief and a dead senator. But they knew exactly what to do with me. I was the nurse vigilante, the angel of the docks, the scalpel saint. The headlines were insane, breathless, and utterly wrong. They painted me as some kind of avenging angel in scrubs, a woman who stitched up her enemies and took down a political empire between coffee breaks. The photograph of me, face grim, illuminated by the flashing lights, my hands covered in the senator's blood, was on the front page of every paper. The hospital was not amused. Vigilantism is not part of the nursing code of ethics. "We are in a difficult position," Lena, my nursing supervisor, told me, her face kind but firm. We were in her small, cluttered office. "You saved a man's life, on a pier, in the rain. After, apparently, he was shot following your involvement in a criminal conspiracy." "I was a hostage," I said, my voice quiet. "You were a hostage who then took charge," she corrected gently. "The board is concerned. The press is calling you a hero, but our insurers are calling you a liability. You used your medical training at an active, Unauthorized scene. You kept a known criminal alive. To get his testimony? That is not your job. Lena, your job is to save the life. Period. Not for a reason. She was right, Moinetti. She was wrong. I am suspended. I said it was not a question. Temporarily, she confirmed. Pending a full hearing of the review board, we need to know what you were thinking. We need to know if you are still a nurse, or if you are... This, she gestured to the newspaper on her desk. I nodded. I did not fight. I accepted the papers. I walked out of the hospital, the place that had been my entire world for 5 years, and for the first time, I did not have a shift to go to. I went to the clinic, the quiet place upstate. June was there. She was not in a private room. She was in a standard, shared room, her hair back to its natural brown. She was thin, pale, but her eyes were clear. We sat in the common room, a place that smelled of bleach and cafeteria coffee. They are calling you the nurse vigilante, she said, her voice small. She was holding a copy of the same newspaper. Is it true? Did you really drop a container on a guy? I hit a button. June. And you kept the senator alive, the one who... Adrian's uncle. I did. She was quiet for a long time, tracing the lines on the linoleum floor with her sneaker. I am tired, Lena, she said, her voice catching. I am so tired of being the emergency. I am tired of you having to run into fires that I set, seeing that picture of you. That is not who you are. You are the person who argues about pizza with dying kids. You are not a vigilante. Tears started to roll down her cheeks. He is going to prison. Is not he Adrian? He is facing a federal investigation, I said carefully. He made a deal. He confessed to everything. He is cooperating. He did it for you. I did not answer. I am going to stay, June said, wiping her face. I am not checking out after 3 days. I am staying. I am going to do the work. All of it. She looked up at me, her eyes the clearest I had seen them since we were children. I am sorry I am such a bad sister. Lena. You are not a bad sister. June, you are just... lost. No, she said, shaking her head. I was lost. Now I am just... late. I think I want to grow up now. I really think I do. That was the day my sister saved herself. My life became a new, strange kind of routine. My 30 days as a guest were long over. The penthouse was a crime scene, part of a federal asset seizure. Adrian was not there. He was in a world of lawyers, depositions, and federal holding cells. He kept his word. He had transferred the vast legal parts of his empire, the logistics, the real estate, into a new operational structure. He was cutting out the dark gray parts, the parts that had bled into his uncle's network. He was doing it systematically, like a surgeon excising a tumor. And I was dating him. I say dating, twice a week. I would go to a federal building. I would put my bag through a scanner. I would sit in a sterile, gray room. He would be brought in a simple gray jumpsuit, not a suit. He looked smaller without the armor of his tailoring, but his eyes were the same. We would talk, through a plate of glass, over a recorded line. How is your hand? I asked one day, looking at the bandage. It is fine, he said. The sutures are clean. You did good work. How are you? I asked, the question feeling impossibly large. He smiled, that small, sad ghost of a smile. I am liquid. My assets are being assessed. My testimony is being cataloged. I am a resource, not a person. I know the feeling. I said, thinking of the hospital board. We talked. We did not talk about the pier. We did not talk about his uncle or my sister. We talked about his grandmother's bakery. We talked about a difficult case I had at the community clinic. I had not gone back to the emergency room. I could not. The suspension had given me an excuse, but the truth was, I did not want to. Patching gunshot wounds felt futile. I wanted to stop the gun from being bought. I took a job at the community clinic, the one the Vasilo Foundation had funded. It was quiet. I was treating diabetes, managing hypertension, lancing abscesses. I was treating the community, not the trauma. I was trying to fix the system from the inside out. We even tried therapy, a couples therapist who specialized in trauma bonding. It was a disaster. We sat in a beige room, and a kind woman with a lot of degrees tried to get us to unpack our feelings. So, Lena, you felt seen when Adrian identified you as the fixer, she asked. No, I said, I felt like a target. And Adrian, she said, turning to him, you offered a payment plan as a form of control to replace the loss of control you felt in your family dynamic. Adrian just stared at her. I offered it, he said, because her sister's debt was $200,000 and Russo was going to traffic her. It was a business transaction. We did not go back. Some things you cannot unpack. You just have to carry them. The city was healing in its slow, bureaucratic way. The Vassallo Family Foundation was restructured. With Adrian's testimony, the feds had helped clean it out. It was now a fully transparent, audited foundation. I had, in a moment of irony, been offered a seat on the board. I accepted. Mara had been busy. The crypto key I had gotten from Russo, the one I had recorded on the pier. It was a fortune. It was not just his. It was the entire network's slush fund. Mara, working with the federal authorities, had unlocked it. She used her share, her finder's fee, to open her own clinic, the Mara Institute for Digital Security. It was a small office in Fishtown, above a pizza shop. Her clients were not corporations. They were victims of financial violence, women running from abusive partners, people caught in online debt traps. She taught them how to be ghosts. I sat on her ethics board. It consisted of me, her, and a very confused former public defender. Pier 68 was still there, a rotten old skeleton, but someone, the city or the foundation, I was not sure which, had installed a single tall light on the end of it. It was a powerful, bright blue light, the kind they use for memorials. It cut the fog, a small, permanent change. My hearing date arrived. I did not go in with a lawyer. I went in with a report. I stood in front of the board, doctors, administrators, senior nurses. You have suspended me, I said, my voice clear and steady, for practicing medicine outside of a designated setting. You are worried I put a patient's perceived value as a witness above his life. You are wrong. I placed my report on the table. I am a nurse. My job is to see the entire patient. The patient that day was not just Senator Harrison. It was not just Russo. It was not just my sister. The patient was the city. It was suffering from a systemic disease, an infection of corruption, fed by a vulnerability debt, specifically the new predatory online platforms that collect debt in human form. I looked at them, my colleagues, my superiors. I kept that man alive, not just for his testimony, but because it is my job. But I am not just an emergency room nurse anymore. I am not content to just stitch the wounds. I am going to be part of the cure, my voice, the voice of a nurse, the person who sees the real-world consequences of these policies. That voice is going to be my new surgical instrument. I finished. The room was silent. The wound from that night was healing. The skin had been stitched shut by federal agents and lawyers, but it was not a clean wound. It was going to leave a scar. And I was learning, finally, how to live with the scar. 1 year, 12 months, 365 days, in the emergency room. A year is an eternity. It is 10,000 sutures, 1,000 broken bones, 100 lives saved, and a dozen lost. In the world I lived in now, a year was a renaissance. The building in front of us used to be a derelict textile mill, the same one where Russo had run his operation. Now, the brick was clean, the windows were new, and a simple, elegant sign hung over the door, the Fishtown Community Recovery Center. It was not a clinic, it was not a hospital, it was a bridge. It offered financial literacy classes, taught by people from Mara's Institute. It had peer support groups for gambling addiction. It had job placement services funded by the new Transparent Vassallo Foundation. I stood in the weak autumn sunlight, not in scrubs, but in a simple, dark blue dress. Next to me, Adrian stood in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit. He was not a guest, and he was not a prisoner. He was a federal consultant. His deal, his testimony, his complete and total cooperation had earned him a new, strange, and heavily monitored life. He had dismantled his own empire, and in doing so, had given the feds the keys to a kingdom of corruption they never knew existed. He was a free man on a very long leash. The ribbon cutting was a small affair. The new city councilwoman, a young, fierce woman from the neighborhood, was saying a few words, but the star of the show was standing by the door, handing out pamphlets. June. Her hair was a healthy brown, cut into a sharp bob. She wore a simple pantsuit and a name badge that read, June Hart, Peer Support Counselor. She was not shaking. She was not pale. She was solid. She caught my eye and smiled, a real, genuine smile, before turning to help an elderly woman find the coffee. She had done the work, all of it. She had stayed for the full year, moved into a sober living house, and had just been hired as their first graduate trainee. She was not a fire. She was an anchor, like me. She's doing good, Adrian said, his voice low, meant only for me. She's doing the work, I said. You did this. Lena, this center, her... I just stitched the wound, I said. The community did the healing. Later that evening, we were in the small garden behind the house I had bought. Not a penthouse, not a tiny apartment, a small row house in South Philly. With a tiny square of grass I was stubbornly trying to turn into a garden. The air was cool, smelling of damp leaves and the city. Adrian was sitting on the back step, his tie loosened, his jacket off. He was watching me. He was always watching me. Still, like he was auditing my soul, but the assessment was gone. It had been replaced by something softer, something that looked a lot like peace. What are you thinking about? He asked. Triage, I said. He smiled, always. I am trying to decide which task to perform first, the one that is most urgent or the one that will have the best outcome. And what are the tasks, he asked? Indulging me. I walked over to him. The light from the kitchen window cast us in a warm, yellow glow. I sat down on the step next to him. Task 1, I said, is to thank you for coming today, for standing by me, even when the press still calls you their formed kingpin. You are welcome, he said, his voice a rumble. What is task 2? I held my breath, then I reached into the pocket of my dress. My hand closed around a small, heavy object. Task 2, I said, is to address a structural deficiency. I pulled my hand out. I opened my palm. Sitting in the center was a ring. It was not silver. It was not gold. It was a dark, heavy gray metal, polished to a dull, matte sheen, and hammered into a simple, thick band. Adrian stared at it. He did not understand. It is recycled, I explained, my voice suddenly a little shaky. The metal is from a shipping container, a blue one, from Pier 72. I had Mara find the salvage crew. It took them 3 months to cut it, and a jeweler another 2 to melt it down and shape it. His eyes lifted from the ring to my face. His expression was one of complete, stunned silence. I am proposing, Adrian, I said, the words suddenly feeling very large in the small space. I am the nurse. I like to fix things. And we are the most broken, messed up, structurally deficient thing I have ever met, and I want to keep fixing it. With you. For as long as we both shall live, or until the federal government objects. He did not laugh. He did not speak. He just looked at me, and I saw his eyes glisten in the yellow light. A single, slow tear tracked its way down his cheek. The man who had faced down Russo, his own uncle, and the entire federal government was crying. He laughed then, a short, choked breath of a sound. It was the first real, unguarded laugh I had ever heard from him. He reached out, not for the ring, but for my hand. He held it, his stitched-up, scarred hand holding mine. You are the guarantee, Lena, he whispered, his voice thick. Is that a yes? That is a yes, he said, pulling me in. Our wedding was 3 weeks later, in the same backyard. It was a Tuesday. It was us. June, Mara in a formal black hoodie, and 2 very uncomfortable FBI agents who were Adrian's parole officers, acting as witnesses. The day before, a package had arrived, a large white box. It was a bouquet, not roses. It was a massive spray of the same simple, white flowers I had seen him holding in the rain outside the church, all those years ago. I thought they were from him. But the card was not in his handwriting. It was in a precise, neat, digital font. It read, "For Lena, from an old patient who never forgot the woman who kept him alive. Thank you for arguing with me about pizza, and thank you for knowing what to do with my last words." It was signed the accountant. My heart stopped. The kid from my first trauma, the dying man in the ER, they were the same person. The patient I had saved all those years ago was the one who had come back, who had trusted me with the ledger. He was in witness protection. He was alive. Adrian read the card over my shoulder. "The fixer," he said, his voice full of wonder. At the bottom of the card, it said, "P.S. I am still doing audits. I thought you might want to see the new books." Taped to the back of the card was a small, new, black USB drive. We looked at each other. I did not need to plug it in. I did not need Mara to scan it. I knew exactly what it was. The city was a body. We had excised one tumor, but the disease, the infection of greed and power, had found a new host. A new legal corporation had taken over the port, absorbing Russo's old roots. "We are not done with this world, are we?" I sighed. "No," Adrian said, his hand finding mine. "But this time, we are not in the dark." He was right. The next morning, I did not go to a hacker. I did not go to a dark pier. I called my contact at the foundation. Adrian called his contact at the FBI. Mara, from her clinic, was already monitoring the new corporation's data traffic. We were a task force. We were not fixing the system from the outside. We were the new system. June officiated the wedding. It was not legal, but it was real. We stood in the grass, the 2 federal agents looking miserable, Adrian in his suit, and me in my blue dress. I said my vows first. I held his scarred hands. I looked into his dark, steady eyes. "I am not an optimist," I said, my voice clear in the cool afternoon. "I am a nurse. I do not believe in fate. I believe in vital signs. I do not believe in fairy tales. I believe in charts. And I do not promise you peace. I do not promise you quiet. I cannot promise you a life free of emergencies." I squeezed his hands. "I promise you what I promised my patients. I will be there. I will not look away. I will hold the line. I promise to stand next to you when the wind blows." He smiled, and for the first time, it reached his eyes. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I am so curious. Where in the world are you listening from right now? Let me know in the comments so we can share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to my channel, Mafia Boss Stories, and give this video a like. And if you really want to help, please press that hype button so this story can be heard by many more people.